Recording in progress.
And for the time being, if I could ask you to put your microphones on mute until you're speaking.
Oh, don't know how to do that. Oh, here we are. Mute.
Great. Okay. Hi, my name is Kevin Murray. And I'm speaking to you from Naarm, Melbourne, on the land of the Wurundjeri people, where the parrots are now nesting. And I pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and the ancestors of the lands where you come from. And welcome to those who've shared their stories in this 24th issue of Garland magazine. Your stories help us navigate the divide between East and West. And thanks particularly to the pathfinders who helped map this trajectory, Audrey and Arif Sata, who we'll be hearing more of later, Bernard Kerr, Blake Griffiths, Helen Ting, Jude van der Merwe, Kamya Sharma, Liz Williamson, Lokesh Guy, Madhvi Subramanian, Manasi Jog, Michelle Elliott, Priyanka Jain, Sandra Balkut, Susie Vickery, and Witagrai Sirapon. We ended up following the path of the bote, the teardrop motif that evolves from ancient Persia to modern Scotland, reflecting an appreciation of the life forces that enrich our world. This issue also celebrates the advent of the Indian Ocean Craft Triennial, which I think is the most significant craft event to emerge this millennium. And we'll get a glimpse of it later from the scene itself in the Fremantle Arts Centre, from thinker makers for this issue, Arif and Audrey Sata. As is our custom, this issue is dedicated to someone who's made a significant contribution to our field, in this case, Helge Larsen, who established the jewellery department at Sydney College of Arts, and with his wife, Durrani Lewis, helped found platforms of craft that we continue to use. Now, the previous dedication was to Dr. Gada Hijawi Kadumi, who was at that time the incoming president of the World Crafts Council, and I'm pleased to welcome her son, Asad Al-Kadumi, who generously stepped into her position to sustain the presidency. Welcome, Mr. Saad.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Good morning from Kuwait. I guess it's good evening to everybody else. I'm really honored to be invited in my capacity as WCC interim president. This is really a great honor, also a first experience, but I find it very special because, you know, I would have imagined it that the late president, world president of WCC, my mother, would have been now here, you know, addressing this. So I really thank you for the invitation of Garland G24 event with many thanks. I would just like to mention just a few words to describe that the craft industry in this world is very important, that we maintain it, that we allow it to survive in order to you know, preserve our heritage, to preserve the cultures. You know, every region on this earth has its own heritage, and without the crafts, I think the world would be barren from beauty, from the meaning. Will be just like probably any other grazing animals wandering around, trying just to survive and eat without anything to show. The world craft industry embodies, symbolizes, projects, and speaks out about each region's heritage, culture, folklore, and the interaction between them. Garland brings the world together in this issue, which contains so many fruitful craft journeys between East and West. The Indian Ocean Craft Triennial is an important international craft event which offers promising new forum for connecting Africa, Middle East, South and Southeast Asia, and Australia. Here I would like to say congratulations to Vice President for the Pacific Subregion, Ms. Jude van der Merwe, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Assad, and it's great that you could be here. Well, let's start having a look at this issue, and it seems like we've got quite a few of the writers with us today. And if we could start with Susie Vickery. I can see you're here with us. Would you like to give us a brief rundown of your article? Susie, you're on mute.
Unmute, yeah. Hello, everyone. So I did, because I swim every day, I wanted to do something.
Online meeting for half an hour.
Can you hear me?
My auntie sent me about some art exhibition.
Put your
Oh, okay.
microphone's on mute. I'll just try and unmute mute people. Okay.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to do something about some historical characters that I'd found and about how they transformed themselves by crossing the ocean. And then also in turn about how we're transforming the ocean. So I worked with my collaborator, Bapadichi Biswas in Kolkata to make the ocean because I realized I couldn't embroider 50 meters, and he painted up in batik indigo a wonderful ocean, and then painted up lots of fish to go on the ocean, and also the creation, the Hindu creation story of the churning of the ocean of milk. And so you work your way through a maze of the ocean and meet the characters on the way chronologically. And then I worked with my colleague Mark Binns as well to make the mechanisms for the different automata. And then you get to the end and all the characters are actually surfing on plastic bottles on an ocean covered with plastic bottles and waste. And the plastic, I commissioned a handicraft group that I work with in southern Nepal, and they painted up images of plastic trash. And then Bappa painted them in indigo onto cloth, and then we appliqued them onto the ocean. So it's layers of people working together. So, you know, we're transforming ourselves as well in the process of representing this transformation.
Great. Thanks very much, Susie. And this is definitely an installation where you have to be in Perth to see it. And I do hope it gets to tour. And it's great. It shows not only the amazing story of transformation across the ocean, but also your own collaborations in the subcontinent as well.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, if we could go now to Ishan Khosla. Are you there, Ishan?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Kevin, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and I really enjoyed writing the article for Garland. So I guess my artwork is fairly complex. I've also collaborated with various craftspeople around India, probably about 7 or 8 different craft traditions. You can call it like from Gonda art to Matani Pacheri, which is done on textile, and various other traditions as well. I've used the vehicle of the coward like this object that you see, these wooden objects are called carverts. And basically they're inspired by that form, but it's no longer made by the carvert artisan in this case, because we worked during COVID times, which made things, one had to kind of innovate on the fly in many ways. So many of the ideas had to be pushed and worked with urban artisans instead, carpenters and people like that. But all the artworks, the paintings have been done by myself and with combination with various craftspeople, about 8 or 9 of them from around the country, as I mentioned. So we had to work remotely, and this article basically talks about one aspect is, of course, the artwork itself, which looks at the mistreatment of animals. And since Hinduism is really focused on respecting, worshipping animals as the vahan or vehicle, or as you see here with Ganesha, the animal form is being worshipped, right? That of the elephant. So I use these as a starting point to connect to the narrative traditions, which basically tell stories about these animals and animal gods, to what's happening to animals today, right? The kind of exploitation, including plastics in the ocean, as Susie also mentioned. I have looked at that with the Madhubani crafts people. And I guess this article, in a nutshell, talks about the challenges of not only working with various visual languages. So we're working, I try to work with all sorts of, a panoply, I would say, of Indian visual traditions, from calendar art, vintage labels, sticker art, Bollywood painting, but also the fud painting, miniature art, mithila art, so all the various artistic traditions in quote, but also the vernacular, and layering it up with typography and other types of storytelling, because traditionally these were recited, but since there's no recitation of these works, typography and text becomes important. One of the critical aspects was, of course, WhatsApp and digital technology, communication, another layer of communication on top of this object of communication, uh, to enable the craftspeople and myself to have dialogues. And that was only possible through WhatsApp, because they don't have Zoom and other technologies always. So annotations, videos, voice messages, network problems were pretty bad. So we had to just keep sending messages back and forth to each other. And I think one of the things I mentioned here is that this sort of working was very interesting, because there was a delay. Like I would send a message and then they would take a few days to get back, and vice versa, just because of various people were going through various stressful circumstances. People had family members, sick with COVID or themselves. So there was always this delay of a few days to a few weeks sometimes. And that actually helped the process, ironically, in interesting ways, I would say. So yeah, do read the article if you can, and be happy to get your inputs. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ishan. And we've obviously worked together a lot over the years, and I saw your engagement with the Carver more than 10 years ago. And what's appreciated is that it's not just a fly-by-night flavor of the month interest, but you sustain your relationships with carved makers, and it's really grown. It's really wonderful to see, and particularly that there's a platform like the Indian Ocean Craft Triennial to really show it off, which is just fabulous. Okay, if we could go now to Greg Pryor, I saw was in the room. Greg, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Kevin, and congratulations on the issue. It's just so dense and rich, and yeah, well done to all the contributors too. It's a fantastic one to be a part of. So yeah, I was asked to put together a response to artist collective here in the southwest of Western Australia called We Must Get Together Sometime. And I might just, I don't talk about it in the article, but I just want to reflect a little bit on the name of the collective. In some ways, it might be considered a rather casual title, even a remark on departure when you've had an interesting conversation with someone, and it's almost left hanging. Oh, we must get together sometime and continue this, and maybe a small percentage of instances you do get together. But playing with a little bit of different inflection, I want to emphasize the time aspect of the collective. We must get together some time. So I think one of the things in the article I write about is that the medium of choice for many of the participants is actually time. And why that's so important, because here in the southwest of Western Australia, many of you will know, it's one of the most ancient exposed areas of the planet that's had the longest the last glaciation event was much further in the past than anywhere else on Earth. So as a result, it's a very exposed landmass geologically in terms of the plants, the biota, and of course, the culture that's embedded in this landscape by the first Australians who have tended to the land with infinite care for millennia. So it was a really interesting exercise to engage with the collective, and their approach to engaging with this highly complex landscape is to give it time. One of the points I make, it's as I was writing it, it's a less visual approach to the landscape, I would say. They privilege something that is much more tactile. It's much more a sensual or sensory connection to land through a very close engagement with touch, hearing, even taste. The cooking that takes place on these artist retreats is a really important component of the dialogues that grow out of the engagement with the land. So look, I think it's less of a, well, I shouldn't say that, because the exhibition is, satellite exhibition's coming up in a few weeks at the Mandurah Arts Centre, which hopefully people can get along to see the outcomes of their work. But I was going to say that it's really important for this group that they do, in a sense, clear away their everyday lives, hence the shedding that's in the title, the quite significant process of casting away your everyday life, your smartphones, these sorts of things, and opening up a space where you might be able to dwell in this complex country here in Western Australia. And ultimately, of course, dialogues and encounters take place that ultimately, but in not all instances, produce outcomes that have been extremely well considered. I just wrap up the article by a little bit of historical context, and the group of makers that come together in this group have, in most instances, had some contact with the artist camps that have been run out of Edith Cowan University here in Perth for probably around 30 years. Such luminaries like Elsa King and Nalda Searles, who's got a lovely article on her work in this issue, and most recently Neen Schwartz and Annette Nakiel, who have continued that tradition. But they've picked that up because these artist camps are too risk adverse for many art schools or universities to take on board now, too expensive to run. So it's actually cut out, I think, a really important and profound educational experience for the many people that used to take part in these artist camps. So I just think it's great that they've independently picked up that space and are attracting people to the collective, because yeah, lots of problems with reduction in resources, etc., in many universities. So I just thought I would do my little bit and put this article together in support of what is just a great initiative.
Well, thanks very much, Greg. And bearing witness to what perhaps is now a tradition in Western Australia, partly seeded through these bush camps, and shows a strong fibre base, certainly, but particularly connection to land, such an immense land in the West. And it's great that that underpins the craft triennial. Now let's go to another vast land, Brazil, via Japan. Liliana, are you there? Can you tell us about Koge between Japan and Brazil?
Yes, I'm here, Kevin. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Yes, I wrote about the life story of a Japanese ceramic artist in Brazil, and the intersections of her life and her thoughts with the histories of craft in Japan and Brazil as well. And so I start by exploring a little bit the differences between the Japanese word koge, which would be translated in English as craft, and then the Portuguese word for craft, which is artesanato, and the different meaning and connotations of these words, and how the Japanese word koge was important for the Japanese immigrants in Brazil. We have a long story of Japanese immigration, and so I go through a little bit of that story, particularly Japanese craftspeople have also moved to Brazil in the post-war period, and so I intersect those stories with the the personal account of Shoko Suzuki, who was trained as a ceramicist in Japan and was attracted to Brazil for its, in a sense, for its novelty, its wilderness, and also was driven there by a dissatisfaction with the status quo in Japanese society, particularly towards women in that time. And so she was driven by a desire to work free of those constraints, both of the tradition and also gender constraints. And her and other craftspeople were responsible for introducing Japanese craft techniques, Japanese craft aesthetics to Brazil, and rooting those techniques and aesthetics in Brazil as well. And so, yes, please, if you have time to read the article, and I guess that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, obrigado. Thank you very much, Liliana. And we look forward to further insights as the journey continues, particularly around Minge, as we look at the divide between rich and poor in craft. Now, is Pamela there? Pamela C.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, thank
wonderful.
you, Kevin. I'm speaking from Brisbane in Australia, the land of Jagera people, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the elders emerging past and present. And my article is actually about my experiences in China with a gallery called Redgate, and it's just celebrated its 30th anniversary. So I'm interested in it in terms of East and West because it's presented and continues to present a locus for cultural exchange, which is quite special, particularly given our challenged relationship between Australia and China. And it focuses on two artists who I've interviewed that have had ongoing relationships with the gallery and the two art scenes. The Australian arts industry and the contemporary art industry in Beijing. So Redgate Gallery was the first private gallery to open in the beginning of the 1990s. And a number of artists at the time had left because of the June 4th incident. So this includes Guan Wei, who is arguably the most celebrated of the Chinese artists to come during the late 1980s, early 1990s. So through Redgate Gallery, he continued to show in Beijing, but he also went back, particularly in the lead up to the 2008 Olympics, and he established a studio there and started to work. He expanded his practice with working with local craftspeople. So it moved from, he's largely known for his paintings. He was largely known for his paintings, and then he moved into bronze, cast bronze sculpture and also ceramics. And I think what happens in China is that people like to send their work to be fabricated, but Wen Wei was very particular in learning the crafts himself. So that there's a deeper engagement, much more profound effect on his practice. And then the other artist that I interviewed was an Australian artist that spent a lot of time over there named Jane Dyer. And so there were also repercussions for her work. She also went back during the 1990s and continued into the early 2000s and did things. You can see that she was influenced with papercraft and moved into manufacturing. When she was over there, these butterflies that she created en masse that moved into steel from paper. And she said that she sort of was also very interested in not only the physical environment there, but just this sense of, I guess, the engagement that the people had with the sense of ideologies of democracy. And what I find really interesting about her work too is that these I think they're a particular kind of a particular kind of butterfly endemic to the area, but they're kind of black and they're massing. They're quite menacing in a way. So there's a certain element of, I think, that's quite threatening, and as you would always have if you're introducing a new ideology to a place. I'm not wanting to make any judgments about that at all today, but so to surmise though that with Redgate's presence, they really facilitated, aside from commercial buyers, people interested in Chinese contemporary art. They were artists who were not of Chinese background coming to have a look and experience the culture, and a lot of them, this cultural dislocation, in a sense, this immersion into a completely different culture, they really benefited from that. So Jane may fit that category. There are also artists like myself, artists and writers who are diaspora, who came back to learn about the roots of their culture. And then there were artists like Wen Wei who were returning. And lastly, what was really interesting about the article, and I'm really grateful to Kevin for this, was it gave me a space to investigate the sensitive topic of cultural appropriation. And I guess the question is, for the Chinese, is this so much of an issue? Because they are quite, not only did I think a lot of techniques did originate technologically from China and evolved as they moved into Europe, and in some cases to a virtually unrecognizable form. This, for instance, paper making that the European tradition, which came across via the Islamic Muslim nations and people, they used to make it with from cotton rag, which initially, when they started to do exchange with China, they didn't realize it was the same technique that had evolved from what was actually practiced, was invented in China. So But what I'm getting at though is, I'm getting to my point, sorry, the long scenic way around, is that with Orientalism that was presented by Edward Said, it's sort of in the 20th century, it's actually quite the European preoccupation. So that in the sense that the Chinese, they don't appear to kind of think that all objects and beings are defined by difference. So they don't need something to be its opposite to actually have its own identity. Whereas in a European sense, and this notion dates back all the way to Plato, Socrates, that they need something that is not to define what it is. And actually, with Taoism, for instance, Laozi really emphasized this idea that being and not being are in fact the one. And that difference is a point of power. So in this sense, that I'm, and this may be quite a personal interpretation, but appropriation, so long as it's not anything that's derogatory, is fine. It's okay for them. Yeah, so that's what the article is about.
Thanks very much, Pamela. And certainly the article, as you can tell, explores issues in depth, and I recommend you read it, but also Pamela's other articles. She is a perennial, somebody who's shared more than 4 stories in the Garland platform, and to an extent is a Renaissance woman who puts together the crafts that she specializes in, paper cutting, but also the ideas that she uses to interpret that. So if we can go next to Blake Griffiths. Are you here? You're the featured artist in this
issue. I
issue.
am here. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Look, I wrote a relatively short little note for the issue, but I suppose, I'm just kind of, it's about my own practice, I suppose, but this just details some kind of moment of where I'm at, I suppose, with my practice, having, of course, spent a little bit of time in India, kind of observing artisans, making woven cloth. But I suppose more so, without being any kind of concrete idea, it's just kind of noting what it is to kind of sit in contradiction, particularly around this kind of binary of East and West, but also kind of relaying that to the warp and the weft and the woven structure. So, many of these ideas are kind of not refined, and I need maybe 50 more years to kind of sit with them. But it's really about how I'm thinking about the structure of, the woven cloth essentially as warp and weft, not as anything, or not trying to do anything technical, but other than use it as a framework for understanding all the work that I'm making in the studio. So, while my work in exhibition or as a public output is kind of mainly woven work, I thought it would be nice just to document some of the other happenings in the studio in drawings, and some, other experiments that I've been working on that ultimately are still kind of referencing the woven structure. So yeah, that's my little bit. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks very much, Blake, and terrific understanding of material thinking through warp and weft and how it can bring together these orthogonal directions. Now, Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin, and hello, everyone. Cultural appropriation came up with Pamela's conversation there. So this is something that I have been struggling with some time. Being a ceramicist, it was the initial Pathfinders conversation that I realised what my strong connections with the East are as a ceramic practitioner in Australia. Our tradition is is not a long tradition, so we have been borrowing elsewhere for as long as potters have been making things in Australia. Yes, so I am speaking from Australia. So it's just been a very unconscious thing as part of my practice. So the Pathfinders conversations prompted me to do some research into, so I was specifically looking at the glazes that I used, some of the glazes that I use, the Oriental ones, Celadon, Chino, and Tenmuku. So it's just, they have just been part of the tradition for so long that, I've been using them for 40 odd years. Their histories have been lost to me, even though, some time ago I was more aware of it. So I did go back to my old glaze book and was looking at the provenance of the glazes that were there from my student days. And they were prefaced by names, friends' names or other students, lecturers' names. So it was like Mitsu's Shino and David's Tenmuku. So then I did do a little bit of research because I was wondering how I am going to go forward using these words. And I did try on using Celadon-like, Shino-like, Tenmuku-like, and it sort of wasn't working for me. And what I came to, my conclusion I came to was that I'm actually part of the tradition. It's a very global, for many of these names, they don't necessarily even originate in the East or China or Japan. And even like the Japanese borrowed from the Chinese. So the names have, going back to the 12th century or so in time, when is it appropriate to, or when is it inappropriate to use a term? So it has, it's still a question for me, and I have posted some things on Instagram, and there's quite a few people now. Well, it's not a new debate, obviously. So I've welcomed the opportunity, Kevin, thank you, to do this research. And it's an ongoing question.
Thanks, Sandra. It certainly has generated a lot of discussion, and I think many people appreciate your sense of it being a continuum in terms of that tradition as we look at the Botte and Paisley as well. But it helps to be aware of that, of where it comes from. Now we go to Myanmar via Perth with Marina Lamerse, is that right? Do I say your name correctly? I hope so.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. So this story is really about a slightly different approach. It was about connecting a community through the crafting and planting of 1,000 paper flowers down an alleyway that had been revitalized. It's in an old alleyway in Old Yangon, the Rangoon. And we set up an outdoor, you can see we've set up an outdoor studio in the alleyway where locals were invited to craft flowers. So it was set in there's a series of alleyways. They were locked off by the military for 30 years and became, kind of infected places. And this NGO developed it into public spaces. So, basically what we did was used craft as an approach to show the people, the community in that area, how these spaces could be used, because they were new spaces and they needed to be cared for and thought about in terms of how they could be used. So the alleyway really became a workshop space, a gallery space, an exhibition space, and a play space. And so over a 2-week period, we crafted these thousands of flowers, painted the paper, worked with local school children, with architecture students, with just the locals in the community itself. and a lot of young 20-somethings that had finished their university training but had there's no jobs there. So the flower theme emerged through an initial trip there where through writing and drawing and photography, facilitated by a local craftsman and photographer in Yangon, this idea of the flower being so integral to their culture emerged, and that's how we came on this theme. So basically, the result was that it started a conversation. You can see through these workshops, it started a conversation with the local people in that community. There were 600 residents in that particular laneway. And, many of them participated over the 2 weeks, but also other people, just people who came off the street, maybe sat down for an hour and helped me, dye some paper or make a flower. And we had young children, even preschool age, that were, we facilitated them just doing little scraps and etc. So that was, it was a friendship project between Myanmar and Australia.
Thank you very much, Marina. That is a great testament to the flower as a currency of welcome, which we know so well in Garland. Thank you so much. Now we go to another perennial, Janet Terorang. Selamat sore.
Ya, selamat sore, good afternoon, Kevin. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I would like to share. Oh, it's Enrico.
Yes.
Or maybe he should go first.
No, you go first. I'll just find it.
Okay. Okay, I would like to share a few things about my article. Yeah, so this one is basically the article that I introduced one of the sustainable fashion industry in Indonesia, which is they collaborate with my students. Yeah, my students are Generation Z. And then the sustainable industry player, which is Ibu Sancayarini, she is the founder of well-known Kana Goods in Indonesia, based in Jakarta. So she gave the knowledge for the students on how about Shibori textile mixed with Indonesian batik. And then also teach the students how to deleting textile waste by creating sustainable fashion products, genderless, adjustable for all size, and also for creating small fashion accessories from the textile waste. It is interesting because Generation Z, or we call it Gen Z, is the type of generation is taking more joyful approach while making an impact for us. So actually we can rely to them because they value optimism, and then they can embrace localism, and then they also focus on the society. Okay, the next one is also the same. Yeah, but this one is my brand collaboration, which is the sub-brand fashion brand focused on the sustainable fashion concept. And this one, we raise the empowerment of every farmer, every sale farmer, which is they are impacted by COVID-19. And then this one also, they impacted others, such as the handloom production, yeah, and then the handloom artisans. So from this article, other than I explain about the collaboration within me and my students to create the adaptable fashion products, yeah, And then we also use the waste from my previous fashion collection back in 2014. So I don't throw any textile waste from my previous collection to the landfills. So I keep it until now. And then we are going to use it when it is suitable to mix with. So this chance, yeah, I mix the hand weaving, yeah, which is the handloom, together with the machine weaving, which is from the textile waste. Other than that, on this article, also, we are supporting donation. We are supporting donation. Maybe you can find on the below. There is a website. Yeah, you can click on it, where you can support the area farmers, yeah, area sale farmers, by donating to them, or maybe buy some handloom textiles, yeah, to support them to get productive, yeah, while pandemic situation like this. Okay, I think that's it about my articles,
I can
Kevin.
see Janet, and Janet's not only provided 2 articles on this issue, but also as a wonderful citizen of Indonesia, she has commissioned several others, and we'll go to one now. Enrico, selamat sore, are you there?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Enrico. Nice to meet you all. This is my first time speaking at Garland magazine. As for the article, this artwork is a collaboration work of me and a batik craftsman from East Java, Indonesia. And as my personal interest in batik pesisir pattern because of the visual art pattern and the philosophy. This is one of my creation of batik Feng Huang, because Feng Huang is, as in my opinion and my research, batik Feng Huang is different from Phoenix pattern, and the philosophy is different too. I'm sorry because my English is not really good. I think you can read the article, and as for I'm in the fashion industry since 2011. That's all. Thank you. Sorry for this continuous.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih, Enrico Hall, and it's wonderful to welcome you to Garland. We hope to hear more of you. Now, if we could go next to your colleague, Geraldus. Sugin, are you there?
Yes. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for Garland to invite me to launch G24. I want to introduce my article. This article is tell about Batik Jember. Batik Jember have a mythology. Mythology is like a dragon rise. Really make a person in Jember trust about the myths, and until now. Batik is one of culture in Indonesia who is I really concerned since 6 years, because nobody general millennial, no one wants to raise up about the batik. So maybe as a fashion designer, I must raise up batik, especially Batik Jember. That is my article. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Geraldus, Sugin, and
Yes.
hope to see you again as well. And congratulations on your work in batik. Now we can go to Priyanka. Are you there?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity to write for the Garland. So this article is from my current research at RMIT University, where I'm doing a PhD, and it's also been affected by the pandemic. I was in Melbourne for about 6 months in 2020, and my husband was supposed to join me, but he couldn't. And then I shifted back to India. And when I was in India, I came across some old Sanskrit poetry, which had been translated in English. I don't know Sanskrit. And it was kind of interesting to think about how these Sanskrit poetry had been, shunned by colonial censorship when the British had colonized India, and how the entire process of colonization had, changed our attitudes towards erotic poetry, erotic literature, and erotic arts. And I wanted to revive that. These are drawings. They are made digitally with on Adobe Illustrator, and they are inspired from Indian miniature paintings, which have this red borders. And instead of taking the actual human figures and stuff like that, I concentrate on the molecular and cellular anatomy which is within our bodies. And there are small erotic poems and verses written in these images. And this is also part of my research to use scientific facts and material from scientific literature and use that in the field of arts. So I just read out, for example, the verse written here in this image in front of you says, ginger slices dry on the terrace, ginger juice on my fingertips, ginger spice in the winter laddus warms my breath as well my lips. Ginger roll of ginger on my finger warms my staphylococci to arouse your corner bacteria when I tickle your inner thigh. So it's basically from microbiology. The new research says that there are microbes in our bodies which are connected to our brains, and they influence how we think and we act. And so in a kind of a new way, previously we believed in the divine and in the intervention of God and destiny. And now I am placing all my human agency on these microbes, like we have done with the COVID-19 virus as well. So I'm kind of assuming that it is not I who fall in love, but actually my microbes of my gut, skin, hair, etc., that actually make me fall in love with another person and interact with the other person. And these drawings kind of illustrate the chemical reactions happening within my bodies when I eat food, what happens to the food when it breaks down, the chemicals that come out from those foods, how they get digested by the different microbes inside my intestines, and which then pass on to my body and where my bloodstream, and then enter my brain, etc., etc. So it's kind of like, because I've not been able to travel outside into the world, I've been forced to travel inwards and also travel back into the past, into medieval India, into classical Indian poetry and literature, and bring them all together into the present moment. That's it.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. What a marvelous combination of the classical and the modern. And thank you to your microbes as well, who have sustained you through that. That's really quite wonderful. Now, if we could go to Africa, to Francis Potter, who speaks to us about Mozambique. Welcome, Francis.
Hi, Kevin. I'm really very completely overawed by the company that my piece finds itself in. Congratulate all of you on an amazing issue. And am I unmuted? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll be quite brief. The organization I work with works with artisans mostly in Africa to help them bring what they make to markets so they can earn money. We don't trade in craft. So what we try and do is help them set up organizations where they can trade in craft themselves. This trip to the Gorongosa communities around, to the communities around this big park was absolutely amazing, partly because the area is very inaccessible. And everyone said to us when we started, you won't find any craft there. But we did find a lot of craft, and we found some extraordinary basketry in communities that have been very war-torn for a long time. And but the craft is within the communities, it's but everybody who lives around there is a subsistence farmer, and subsistence farming is backbreaking work, and a lot of people welcome the opportunity to make items that could be sold to what Mozambique hopes will be a growing tourism industry. And now this mention of the Indian Ocean Triennial, I think Mozambique's on the Indian Ocean, so we may have some great contributions from Gorongosa that would come to such a thing. This guy here is doing a very traditional plait, but it's still very fine work, and it's not really seen outside of that community. Hopefully we should be going back to Mozambique in the next, I found that little pot just talking about erotic art, that little pot hysterical, because we were completely intrigued with it. Just go back, Kevin, if you can. With two kind of spiky things on it. Not to worry if you can't see it, but it's, let's see, that one. My colleagues and I were in hysterics, and we thought it's just stunning, and it's all wood fired, and I've been intrigued at seeing how the wood firing that's being achieved in Australia is of such quality. So I'm hoovering up the experience of being in this meeting and reading your fascinating articles. Hopefully we'll have more to report on how this project goes in the next 5 of this area, is that nobody's saying you've got 6 weeks or 6 months to produce stuff. It's long, and hopefully we will leave a good contribution to Mozambique's craft when it's over.
Thanks very much, Frances. And it's good timing too, because of course the next issue, which is looking at Rich and Paul, we look at the impact of the pandemic and how dependent much of the crafts in Africa have been on tourism, and what this means for the local craft communities. So this feeds very well into it for the next issue. So thank you very much. And now we go to our friends in Turkey.
Thank you for pushing it to happen. I'm very happy not to.
I'll keep doing it. So very pleased to welcome Songul Aral, who's already written for us, and who's here with two of her friends who feature in this article. Songul, welcome. You have to unmute. We cannot hear you. You have to unmute. Sorry, you have to unmute. Good.
Merhaba. Hello, I am from Turkey and Malatya. And small something, Fidan baby from Malatya. Hello. Now I will read word to Lale and Fidan's. I am sure you will read the article. I just want to get to know the two ladies who took part in the information of this story. And let's use our time well. Let's see how the babies of the Fidans and hand dressed in the story. Yes, my teacher Lale.
Hi. Hi, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, I'm from Turkey and I'm from Ankara. I have been working as a lecturer in the art, design and craft department at the university in Ankara 40 years. Thank you very much, Songül, for introducing me to working nice people like you. I'm very happy. My English is limited, of course. I can explain everything, but I will try. Your work and your magazine are very useful and beautiful. I like it. We love Fidan because Fidan is very important.
Merhaba.
Fidan say hello from Kars. She is carries the culture, the clothes she wore in her childhood and yet not wearing now, wore it for you today. Fidan wore it today for you. Now she puts her clothes on dolls and she teach how it is done. The doll for domestic and international tourism. The aim is to share our regional rich culture with the world and earn living by working. We are just supporting Fidan because she is working hard and like she or he is. Using very exaggerating color in clothing because it looks like the nature she lives in. Before, women dressed in the traditional clothes because she wants to look big, generous and strong at the same time. I wish I can work together one day. I invite you to my country. My country has a lot of regional and different type traditional clothes, maybe 100 of kinds. I show you Fidan is clothes is a lot of piece of because wearing and then this one up this one this
Jacob.
and then this one again again and again wearing because a big woman she wants big woman and then this is like this and then wearing like this again like this and a little piece of and then wearing this one like this and I like it a piece of I'm wearing I'm wearing like this, and I like this a piece of one. Everything is handmade. Fidan is made it, and I like this one. Like this. Maybe Fidan is said me no lale wrong like this maybe, but I show you.
Yes. Okay.
And like this, I like it very much. And Fidan is wearing this baby, and every time Fidan sewing the baby, every time. Very hardworking woman. I like Fidan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Songul.
Thank you.
Fidan.
Fidan teyze hoşça kal. Merhaba. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Sağ olun.
Okay. Thank you so much for doing that, and go well. And I will say that this is an article also not just about Turkey, but about the wonderful journey between Turkey and Japan. You'll have to read the article to understand that, but teşekkürler. Thank you. And the last article before we go to the thinker makers in the gallery is from Indonesia, Rahayu Budi Handayani. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Kevin. I'm so overwhelmed because before me, Fidan is very beautiful. Good afternoon, everyone. Greeting from Indonesia. This is my first time writing in Garland. Thank you so much for having me. And actually, I have a small business on footwear manufacturing, and that's the background of my article because I've been working and meeting many shoemakers in Indonesia. Actually, Indonesia is one of the biggest manufacturing base for international footwear brands. And actually, we have some area in Indonesia where originally well known to produce handmade shoes. And in this article, I want to share about we actually have gems that quite underrated craftsmen in shoemaking industry because I've been traveled to many cities and meeting them. I have 3 shoemakers in this article I've met and worked with. The first one is my friend. We ever had some collaboration. The first one is from Sagara, Indonesia. I experienced how he's the one who introduced me to the process of handmade shoes and some technique. And from him, I experienced to see the process of hand-welded construction techniques when the craftsmen stitch the welded by hand one by one. And for one shoes, it took about 2 weeks to make. And this is Mas Arif. This is the second one. We collaborate to make these hand woven shoes. And I experienced to see how he precisely hand cut the leather one by one and then hand woven it manually by hand on shoelace. It took about 14 hours to make one pair of shoes. And the last one is from my thesis project. This one, I met Ibu Naomi, who is the manufacturer worker who usually work with industrial machine. And this is actually for my thesis project. I use factory waste and I try to make her making it at home. So all of this upper is being done at home and only the outsole assembling process was carried out at the factory. It's actually a very short brief of preview about Indonesian shoemaking industry. And if you want to know more, I write all in the article. And if you want to talk more with me, I'm very happy and open for discussion. Thank you very much for having me and this opportunity. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Terima kasih, Rahayu. Beautiful work. I'm sure people would be very interested to find out where they can obtain these works. And now finally, we go to the Fremantle Arts Centre, where we come to Arif and Audrey Sata, who shared a very important article about their work, which covers so much of the East and the West, especially across the Indian Ocean, from Mozambique to India, Mauritius, Australia. But they're here in the Indian Ocean Craft Triennial, so we can all share it no matter where we are in the world. So welcome and thank you. Can you introduce us to your work?
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Firstly, I would like to say we are talking to you all and speaking with you all in Waliap, Wajak and Hunga land, and we are honored to be part of this incredible project. It was both such a rewarding journey for me and Audrey, but also for all our family, because we end up communicating with so many members of our family about the journeys we collectively remember, and we are presented on this work.
I just want, before we go, we are sitting in the gallery and with various people passing through and wondering what we're doing sitting with a computer here. But I wanted to start by talking very quickly about something I discussed in the journal, which was about the notion of presencing. The notion of presencing is about presence, but also about sensing. So it is about a perceptive knowing about, in this case, about clay, about paper, about numbering, remembering the stories of our families, and remembering that critical moment when 3.5 million people went across the Indian Ocean during years and years, and that perceptive knowing about craft. How do we become historical beings, and how do we make art? By remembering these stories. So this was a process that we engaged with in detail. And the crafting, the project that we took on, the clay has been part of my life since very early, seeing women creating vessels with clay. But it's not only about looking at, but it becomes the fiber of your own body. So when we remember, when we talk about a piece, it is beyond craft. In many ways, it's beyond craft.
So like Audrey, I was introduced to clay and to this idea of looking at something that's completely embedded in my own history when I was very young. I remember coming out of my house. I was born in Garland, Mozambique, in this amazing place. The whole island is historical and is actually listed under UNESCO. My house, as you came out, you encountered this majestic mosque. And the mosque was covered with these green tiles. And I remember thinking, oh my, what is this? This is the most incredible piece of architecture. And then going to my grandfather's house, and I encountered the shards of broken tiles that my grandfather left in his mantelpiece. He had passed by then. And I remember thinking about this and think, I need to find out more about how this object was made. So I embarked on this journey of learning about clay. And today, the work we are presenting at IOTA, it is very much a culmination of all my life of thinking about this. But now they are rendered with so many histories and so many memories and so many the literature that both encompass, but is also forgotten. about the object we are making. So what we will do, before we go, Audrey would like to read a poem, and then we would show you the works in the gallery, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, maybe we show the images first, the gallery now, and then we'll just change. So I will lift the camera. What you see here, there are 12 portraits. This is Audrey's work. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can
So you want to talk about your portrait?
Yes. These are altered photographs. There are 10 of them. These images were created in 1886 by Rudolf Svoboda, who created a series of images for Queen Victoria. And they were titled Portraits of Her Indian Subjects. I've altered the photographs because they now look back at the audience through tiger eyes, being the tiger as the being that symbolized freedom and resistance. So I painted over the portraits in gouache and perforated the images with symbols of Rangoli designs. I'm not sure if how you can see them in this at the moment in the gallery. So
Yeah, it's a little out of focus, but if you hold it still, good.
So each one of these portraits, as Audrey mentioned, the paper, it's a rag, has been perforated to bring forward Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So we actually traveled to the Isle of Wight in the UK to be able to see the portraits, because we needed to see the originals, and now they're presented as altered photographs.
So the other body of work, part of the Remembering Kalapani, it is this animation. So this animation, I created animation, of course, it's a tiger running in a loop. So it's an endless running. And what I have done, and I had my son, our son was a software engineer, to write a little software program that actually, what he does, there are two sensors mounted on the door of the gallery space. And as you enter, the sensor will pick up, of course, the movement. And through the code that we have written, it translates into a gold number. And the gold number is projected into the running tiger. The objective of this animation is to reach the 3.5 million people that have crossed the Kalapani as endangered labor, including members of my own family. So it is really, it's quite a futile task, because I would never achieve the 3.5 million people. They have gone, the gallery could have been open for months and we still would not achieve that number. So in a way, there is a sense of implication of the audience on the work itself. So this work has, I'm really happy the way we managed to create this work. And yeah, so I'm keen to see what happens on the 7th of November when the exhibition closes, what number will generate in the end. And of course, the other work, which it's been a pleasure to make. I'm not sure if you can see it. I will move a little bit. Audrey, you can guide me.
Yeah, it's a bit unsteady, the camera.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you come here. I'm sorry for this, but. Can you see the tigers?
Yes.
So there is a series of votive sculptures made of clay, and each one of these sculptures, it is has been, of course, there's underglaze, and we have used extensively gold and gold foil and decorated them with musical instruments that really, I just wanted to make sure you can see it. It's hard to, we had a bit of a difficulty getting.
I'll just
Just
show
bear
the
with us.
still image as well. So,
Okay.
Yes.
So here you will see, we just walk over and people will have a chance to see it. It's really difficult to capture the detail of the work, but it has been a process where the image, sorry, I'm just trying to see if we can get it.
Better center, yeah.
So
and what are
each
the
one of these,
what are the objects on top of their heads?
so this is some bronze tree. I'm just trying to see. Oh, please. So there are bronze trees that we have casted them from little branches that we have encountered underneath a tree that around our house. Now, do you want to talk about the trees?
Yes, the bronze trees were to remember a story about an area where I traveled with my grandmother, and all the local crops had been removed because that whole area had been planted with eucalyptus trees transferred from Australia to India. And I remembered the trees, and I could imagine, I imagined animals carrying the trees across the land to bring them in there to that remote place. But I know there's been lots of stories now about the eucalyptuses who left Australia.
And then we have been scouring musical instruments, and we found a whole series of musical instruments that parts of it, and we have embedded our tigers with this incredible array of little pieces that I don't know if you can see it now.
So do they play music?
No, they don't. They just sort of emulate, again, going back to the idea, to the concept of the Tipu tiger. If you recall, Sultan Tipu actually commissioned the creation of the tiger as a musical instrument, but now it's a DNA. And the image, actually the tiger, is a musical instrument, and hence the idea of having all of these animals, in a sense, to have a part of that musical, originally how the tiger was made. So we use a lot of gold foil, and this one here, I'm not sure if you can see, there is, the heads are absolutely decorated with gold foil. So it was, the process of creating this object has been just very phenomenal for me personally, because I haven't done a work like this with so many details before. A lot of my work is much larger scale, and working on this scale has been just incredible. And there's one here that I would like to bring to your attention. So I used to speak Arabic, and about 50 odd years ago, and I forgot, because this is the legacy of moving from place to place, and sometimes the priority of surviving and learning the language became so intensely, immediate, that what I knew went to the background. So this particular tiger is called All the Water in the Garden. So I have gone back, started relearning Arabic and rewriting the tigers with the words I remember, and water is one of those words that are always present. So I wrote water extensively on this one. And I think we go back. One, you want to talk about this one? And then just one more. This one here. And what we have done actually, we created the tigers in its entirety, and then we actually broke some of them. And the idea behind that was to, again, to bring some commentary about the journey that it was crossing the Kalapana. So, and each one of these tigers, it is in a golden box that has these, that mirrors not only the underneath, the underbelly of the tiger, but also what we have noticed, people go into the gallery and they're very keen to see the detail and their own images projected on the box as such. So there's a sense of the people themselves become part of this narrative of what the tigers are or what they represent.
A lot of the imagery that are inscribed in the tigers is also imagery that combines East and West. I was born in India and then studied in Lisbon and studied in Australia, and all of that has influenced how I look back and inscribe the object itself. And there's a multiplicity of symbols. Some of them are from Rangoli designs that I saw my grandmother decorate the doorways, but also now transformed to the lines that I know now, that when I remember, I have changed and I have moved and I obviously draw in a different way. So there's a combination. I think that point of encounter, that boundary, we can only remember after we've passed through that boundary, and that it's that sensing, it's that presencing. So we move across spaces in that way through art in many ways, and I believe that that's one way we can cross boundaries if we are talking about that theme of East and West, without falling into stereotypes or without falling into boxing different practices.
Well, thank you very much, Audrey and Arif. We might just have a little break here so that people who have to go can say goodbye, and we'll come back in a minute. But thank you very much for that, which really does fulfill the promise of the Indian Ocean Triennial to capture something of the way in which the Indian Ocean has been a conduit for peoples and cultures over the centuries, and continues to be so, obviously. And it also refers to the votive traditions of the Indian Ocean, which add a new dimension to the gallery as well, away from the original unique object to objects as offerings given in series, as you've seen.
Thank you, Kevin.
I think we all would agree that the writers, the contributors, the makers have given us quite a feast in this particular issue, which shows how craft can be a very rich connection between different parts of the world, and certainly in this case, East and West, from not only Africa, from Turkey, from India, Indonesia, Australia. And I think, as is our want at the end, it would be nice if we had a little group photo. So we have a little memento of this event. So if you've got your cameras off and you'd like to join this, please do. Hi, Carola, one of the curators of the Triennial. Lovely to see you, as well as Jude. So if you would like to be putting on your best Zoom face, and I'll count down for a group photo. So Emily, you just disappeared into the black there. Great. Mara and Jules, lovely to see you. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Great, everyone's got their eyes open. Congratulations. Thank you for that. Great. That's the end of the official part of today's event. I'll just